Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. This is the France 24 debate. It's the week where the Germans ratify, if all goes to script, a grand coalition, first time since 2009, with at the head, of course, Angela Merkel, re-elected a second time. With us to talk about it, she's a member of both the SPD and the French Socialist Party. Elisabeth Humbert-Dorfmüller, welcome back. Welcome back as well to Marcus Kerber, who teaches at Berlin's Technische Universität. Francesco Saracino of the French public policy think tank, the OFCE. And Bastien Lecoz, who has written quite a few outspoken public forums about defending consumer rights, less red tape in France. I'm very interested to hear what you have to say about the German model and where it's going. You sell promotional gifts. Remind us what promotional gifts are.
It's bespoke product. When you have an idea, I'll make it become real. I do an object with your idea, and mainly for companies who want to communicate with objects, and we produce this directly in factories in Asia. So we have
including France 24 debate T-shirts.
Not yet. We're planning this.
Okay.
And we're doing many hoodies. French students need hoodies these days. It's really cold in France.
Okay, the hoodie. All right. Bastien, thanks for that. We were talking a bit before the break. There was about how this Grand Coalition agreement includes the issue of lowering the retirement age, and there's also the issue of reintroducing the minimum wage. Now, what does that argument have to do with the rest of Europe? Well, more than you think. France 24 went to Lower Saxony and found just how low wages can go without a minimum wage. The impact felt on both workers and on the competition outside of Germany.
The quiet rural region of Oldenburg is at the heart of the German meat industry. Here it's hard to imagine the reality of the freezing abattoirs and meat factories nearby. The lawyer, Johannes Brinkhus, is our guide. And these are the workers no one usually gets to meet. They're Spanish and they work in a factory packing meat in dire conditions. They live in this house on the company land. They haven't been paid a penny since September, and they told us they'd run out of food.
This is their pay slip for September, €546 before tax. They actually get 434. This is modern slavery. The company promises to pay them the money but doesn't, and now they're asking them to sign a document where they renounce their rights. All the while they're living in a house which belongs to the company and the rent is deducted from their salary.
These workers are Spanish, originally from Latin America. Because of the crisis in Spain, they sought work here and now earn €3 an hour. They're not directly employed by this German company, but by a subcontractor, a specialist in the sector, hiring foreign workers for rock-bottom wages.
Our working conditions are catastrophic. Sometimes we work 20 hours a day, sometimes 18 or 16, but the minimum is 14 hours. It's really cold in the factory. We don't have the right working clothes. It's like forced labor.
We want to alert the German authorities to our situation because it's shameful. Hundreds of other Spanish workers are in the same situation as us. Things like this shouldn't be allowed to happen. It's shameful for Germany.
They've lived in this house since March with some Romanians and Lithuanians. There's no heating and it's very unhygienic. But this is no exception. The unions say there are at least 25,000 workers like them, slaughtering more than 40,000 pigs and hundreds of thousands of chickens every day. In the abattoirs, they do the bulk of the work. It's hard to get access to the factories. One of the workers filmed these images. This is how the German meat industry has managed to keep production costs low and beat competition across the European market. If you do the maths, the price for slaughtering a pig is a little more than €1, says Matthias Brummer from the Food Workers Union.
Because of the rock-bottom wages we've seen over the last 15-20 years in Germany, the European meat industry has crumbled. We've got to the point where certain eastern countries are completely dependent on German meat imports. If we just stopped production, that would cause a food crisis in these countries.
Under pressure, the future German government has promised to introduce a minimum wage. For months now, the regional trade unions have been trying to get the meat industry on board, without success. The company Danish Crown, one of the big names in the industry, gave us a telephone interview and told us they pay proper wages. And it's a couple of black sheep who are the problem makers.
We've been working for minimum wages for more than 2 years. The politicians claim that we are not running proper business and so on. And for that reason, we say that, okay, let's have a minimum wage, let's clear all these topics.
But on the ground, there's little sign of change. Paul Sandman has met hundreds of Romanian, Bulgarian and Lithuanian workers in his community centre. He now knows the system inside out, and he says the minimum wage won't solve everything.
Will the company stick to the new rules? It all depends on that. What if someone in an office decides one of their workers has only done 140 hours, not 180, and that the worker cannot prove that? A minimum wage is no help. The new rules will be completely useless unless checks are put in place so that they are properly adhered to.
It will probably take years before there are any real changes, but Raphael and his colleagues may not have to wait. We spoke to the managers of the factory for this report, and they promised to switch their subcontractor and improve their work and living conditions.
When you look at that report, Elizabeth Humbert-Dorfmüller, what will reintroducing the minimum wage, in your view, change?
It will change. It will change because these people are paid probably, slaughtering is paid, I think, between 5 and 7 euro per hour, sometimes even less. And
some are claiming €3 an hour
yes,
in that report.
Of course, this exists also in Eastern Germany, I agree. But raising the minimum wage to 8.50 will be a first step. I'm not saying this is enough because 8.50 is relatively low in comparison to other countries in Europe of the same standard of living, but it will be a first step. What is a little bit unfortunate, it will only start in 2015 and they have even until 2017 to implement it. So that's a little bit too slow for me.
Marcus Kerber?
Well, first of all, the working conditions we have seen are not only astounding, they are a scandal. And I feel ashamed when I see scenes of that kind. But I think the people who have produced that reporting should feel ashamed as well, not to have reported things of that kind in other regions of Europe. You always find employers who exploit the ignorance of workers coming from other countries, not mastering the language, in search of any work, being able to do any job at any pay. And Germany is in the middle of Europe with affluent workers, migrants coming in. So I can only find this example annoying, but not typical of Germany in general. It is typical of special regions, special industries, and a special category of workers who are not organized by the unions. And you've seen the beneficial work of the unions who protest and who organize protest. They are the counterpower in such situations. They are very useful. The minimum pay will not immediately change the situation. What will change the situation is when migrant workers coming from all around Europe, all around Germany, look for the best jobs. If you go to Munich, Frankfurt, Düsseldorf, Berlin, you don't find a job, or you don't find somebody willing to do a job, well, which is a not highly qualified job at a cost or at a pay level of 9, 10, 11. Yeah, so this is the thing. These people have to make intelligent use of market forces, and this is the recommendation I do. In that process of making use of intelligently
but other countries, the French and the Belgians most notably, have complained. The Germans, by not having a minimum wage, and it was said in the report, what they've done is they've undercut all the competition, and basically, to get your meat slaughtered, you have to send it to Germany.
This is a special case in the meat industry. This is not the case in the steel industry. This is not the case in the machine tool industry. This is not the case in developed regions, big centers like Berlin, Frankfurt, Munich. In these countries, or in these parts of Germany, the labor market is extremely tight. And you find it hard to find unqualified labor, and qualified labor. So the scenes we have seen, they are appalling, of course. But they are an exception in a special. And I very much count on the union forces in that case. If unions have one One thing to do is to stand up and to fight and to draw the public attention to these scandals. And this is what they do. And with or without minimum wage, that has to disappear, and that will vanish. I'm quite
Francesco Saracino, does the lack of a minimum wage in Germany undercut the competition in other fields?
I would certainly say that exceptions sometimes become the rule. And of course, in Germany, you have a wide range of wages and of working conditions. I mean, these are working conditions you could easily find in a newscast on China or in India, and I agree, this is very extreme. It remains that wages have been growing consistently less in Germany than in most other European countries in the past 10 years since the euro.
Your statement is totally contradictory. Why are so many people coming to Germany? Simply because the wages are so low? They are extremely interested by the labor market.
Can I finish?
Yeah, of course you can finish, but you're very much away from reality.
I didn't
and
interrupt
what
you.
is distorting very much more competition is the black market in Italy. Once you get the black market under control, the distortion of competition will perhaps be under control. Of course.
Can I go on? Thank you.
Piacere.
The increase in wage, the average and the median wage in Germany, so even considering the very high-end jobs, has been consistently lower than in the rest of the Eurozone. The splitting of the labor market in two in Germany has created an artificially low unemployment rate with lots, not exceptions, lots of mini jobs for 200, 300, 400 euros a month. This, of course, creates an inflow of workers, because if you have the choice between being unemployed in Greece or employed at 400 euros in Germany, you still prefer to be employed at 400 euros in Germany. This doesn't make that a solution. First of all, because that way, and we go back to the issue of the minimum wage, you compress domestic demand and you keep having a siphoning effect on the rest of the Eurozone and of the world if the rest of the Eurozone does what Germany wants it to do. And second of all, because when you have a general tendency towards the depression, the compression of domestic demands and of wages within your countries, your exceptions look like this. So I do believe that a minimum wage is a potentially good news. I completely agree that the schedule for putting that in place will make it irrelevant for Europe, but it's still something that was long due. And in situations like the one we're living today in Europe, the impact, the potential impact on employment and on competitiveness is going to be extremely limited. We are not in a situation where the minimum wage will make the labor market tight and will decrease the competitiveness of German firms. Luckily for us, German firms are not competitive because they pay these wages. Most of the German firms are competitive because they do good products, and so they can afford to pay higher wages.
I'm wondering how they would consume these people if they had no minimum, not this wage, because where would the money come from if they weren't paid those 400 or 300 euros? The first point that you made that was a good point is, why do we pay the same minimum wage in Brittany and in Paris? There's a problem maybe here, and that's why there is unemployment rate really high in some regions in France, because
cost of living is not the same according to what region you live in.
Yeah, it's definitely really different. It's something we have never touched, but maybe it's a question that we need to ask ourselves. And the second point is, people go in Germany because there's no more jobs in Greece. Yeah, that's the thing. There is the wages are going down in Germany because it's the crisis, and because the margin are lower, so companies have to fire firstly these people because they are more unqualified. If I can just make one point on that, is in France, the problem is not the minimum wage, because it's not really expensive. I mean, it's 1,000 and something euros. It's not big. The problem is the difference between the gross and the net. If I pay someone 3,000 euros, a manager in my company, he will cost me 6,600 euros.
High payroll taxes.
And all this money I could take it to hire people at the SMIC in France, so the minimum wage in France. And this is the reason why during the crisis in France we cannot hire the people at the SMIC minimum wage.
All right, but underlying all this discussion is the issue, and you bring it up, is the issue of rising wages or not. And the problem right now in Europe, last Thursday, the Eurozone announcing that inflation would fall well short of expectations. That's not good news, is it?
Well, this is not good news for those who have a very Keynesian attitude towards fiscal policy and who think that
when you see the growth is anemic right now in the Eurozone, having inflation.
There are always deflationary fears by people who think that only stimulating demand is going to...
In the case of Greece, it's more than a fear. It's minus 2.9%.
Yeah, but this is a typical situation of Greece. Fortunately enough, Greece is not typical of Europe and not typical of Germany. Again, those who think that growth can only be stimulated by demand, they feel completely confirmed by the dates we have. They conjure up the images of deflation. My lecture of events is a different one. We don't need a legal minimum wage simply because it's not for the state to decide the level of wages. The great dynamics, for instance, of the Berlin labor market is due to the fact that people flow in from Poland. The Polish borders are only about 50 kilometers there. The Berlin labor market, particularly in the field of not so qualified labor, would not work without the Polish impact, without Polish contribution. All these people are extremely well employed. They're not exploited at all. And people appreciate Polish laborers. So what we are witnessing here is a fairy tale by those countries and by economists like you who want to have a scapegoat for the actual situation, the current situation, and the scapegoat is pre-programmed. It's always the same scapegoat since the Treaty of Versailles, Germany. And if the Germans are willing, are reluctant to accept that role as a scapegoat, well, they conjure up the images of the German past, and now it is German export ratios. Again, let us turn a little bit to that aspect of the matter.
All right, but
exports are up again, a record level of almost 100 billion euros. But imports increase as well because the companies who export have to invest a lot. So the spread between imports and exports...
You know what the difference is, right? So it's a number minus another. You know
are not an economist, you are a propagandist. You don't want to explain things, you want to accuse a country.
Two numbers. You know the definition of a difference.
And you want to accuse a country and a model, which works quite well. Gentlemen. This is very, very unfair.
Francesco.
Do you know the difference between numbers? If you tell me exports increase, but imports also increase, so we benefit the rest of Europe, I tell you, just look at the difference. The difference between the number of cars you make and the number of cars you consume is the number of cars you sell abroad. So even if you import a lot because you are growing, if you export even more, you are still siphoning demand from the rest of the world. This is arithmetic, it's not propaganda.
You're describing the business model which has been described by the European Union, a free market. A free common market. And in this market, Germany succeeds. By the way, exports in Germany do not go as much to the Eurozone countries. They go much more to the Eastern European countries.
Exactly.
So this is not an element which has to be taken into consideration.
No, don't.
I refuse to argue with you in economic terms because you're not an economist. You are a chief propagandist and you want to accuse Germany. You want to accuse a country and a business model which is quite performing. And this is pure professional political jealousy.
Yes.
Elizabeth Humbert-Duffner.
Yes.
Raising the minimum wage. Well, what impact do you think it'll have on the rest of Europe?
Well, as I said before, it will have a limited impact. It is not enough of a minimum wage raise. It's a good news that Germany has agreed to implement a minimum wage. The German economic model, is a purely export-driven model. It's like China, you know. It's a model. You can have, but not if you do unfair competition. And I consider it as being unfair competition if within a economic zone you offer conditions which are way below what your neighbors and partners do. And as to Germany being a scapegoat, excuse me, but Germany has been welcomed into the concert of nations after the Second World War and after reunification. I would never think of that as being designated as a scapegoat. Germany does mistakes, and mistakes have to be pointed out by the other nations.
I'm extremely pleased to make your acquaintance because you are a chief witness for the French Socialist Party to reason and to substantiate the ongoing accusations of Germany of unfair competition. If Germany succeeds in China, in the Chinese market, and France does not, this is not due to unfair competition, it's due to the quality of our products. So have a chat with the Chinese ambassador to France and let him explain to you which is the cause of the reason of German success, because German corporations take Chinese clients seriously and treat them as clients, whereas French corporations do not. So this is a very simple story. A very simple story. It has nothing to do with unfair competition. Germany is not a dumping country. And what you're talking about here is, but I think you have an important role in the propaganda machine of French socialism to play, to be a chief witness of the accusations which Mr. Hollande, an underperforming politician. The German nationality always pays off if you accuse your own country.
Francesco says.
I would just very quickly suggest you not to use the word propaganda every time somebody disagrees with you. There may be arguments and counter-arguments, not just propaganda whenever people say something different from you. Second, let me ask you a question. Did you learn how to make cars only in the past 5 or 6 years? Did you know to do it before or not? Were your cars any worse 10 years ago than they are today? No, right? Your cars were as good as 10 years. A Mercedes has always been a Mercedes, very good cars. Yet, 10 years ago, you didn't have a surplus. You had a deficit. Why? Because your domestic consumption was not compressed. The point is not how many cars you sell to China. The problem is how many cars you consume at home. And you don't do enough of that because your government doesn't spend. Your firms don't spend. You have the lowest investment rate of all the Eurozone in the past 10 years. Is that true or is that propaganda? And you have very low wages. Once again, is that true or is that propaganda? So the problem is not with the quality of your products. The problem is with your compression of domestic demand. The day in which you start expanding your domestic demand, your cars will be very good and will still be sold abroad.
I think.
Okay, so that is not propaganda. This is just numbers.
You are talking. You are selling really propagandist arguments to our spectators. If clients all about the globe buy German products, this is due to what? Is it due to the quality of these products, or is it due to the free decision of these clients? What you're going to do is to tell these clients that they've made the wrong decision. They should have bought the cars or the machine tools elsewhere, with countries like France, which stimulates.
But that's not the point he's making. But excuse me, if I may interpret, the point he's making is, why can't we get the Germans to buy more of those cars?
Well, are we going to put consumers under the dictatorship of whatever instance to tell them where to buy which product? This is a very
Give them the money and they will buy them.
Socialist and collectivist concept of an economy.
I'm not saying force
Let the Germans spend the
consumers.
money how they want to spend
Give
it.
them the money and then they will spend it.
That's what I
With
think
400 euros a month, you cannot buy a Mercedes.
Bastian Lucas.
No, that's the thing. People don't get the money in France also. People don't get the money, and with a SMIC minimum wage in France, you cannot do anything in Paris. So people don't get the money, and on the model we have in France, it maybe needs to be we need to ask a question to ourselves. I'm not saying the German model of not having a minimum wage is the good one, but you need to pay this. And how do you pay it? You pay it with deficit, with new debt. This is what we are doing right now in France. And my generation is really scared of how we will be in 10, 20, 30 years, because we'll not be able to pay for all the things we have been paying for since we were born. So Yeah, to give the money means getting lower difference between gross and net also, I think.
I think we should once again come to the fallacies of our
We're
friend.
going to.
Only to
I'm
give you
sorry,
two
but we're out
examples.
of.
Only to
Marcus
give you two
Kerber, I'm
examples.
sorry, but we're out of time, so we're going to have to leave it there. The conversation could go on for a long time, and it will, because we'll be back to talk about it another time. We'll see how that vote goes in the between the two partners, whether they ratify that grand coalition. It looks like they probably will. I want to thank you, Marcus Kerber, for being with us. I want to thank Bastien Lucas, Francesca Saracino, Elizabeth Humbert-Dorfmüller as well. Thank you for joining us here for the France 24 debate.